Hey. The text was from an unknown number. It was a harmless enough message, so I simply blocked the number and went on with my day, quickly forgetting about it. Hey. This time, it was an email. The sender's address was a long string of random letters and numbers. I paused, remembering the text I received the week prior and wondering how this email got through the filters. I reported it, blocked the email address, and once again pushed it from my mind. Hey. A few days later, I got another message. I stared at the Facebook notification. The profile was essentially blank. The name once again, just random numbers and letters. I felt sweat start to prickle on my brow. The messages before were easily written off as spam, just the result of some seedy website selling my information. This message, however, felt more personal. I reported the account and blocked it for good measure, but had a much harder time forgetting about it. Hey. Only a day later, an Instagram message from a blank account. Now, I truly felt targeted. I reported and blocked the account and spent the next few hours trying to figure out who could be sending the messages and why they were sending them to me. Hey. A few hours later, I received the next message through Reddit. With Facebook and Instagram both linked to my name, I could see someone tracking me across both platforms, but this was something else. I had no idea how they could find my profile, let alone identified it as me. Hey. Discord, and I was now sure I was being stalked. But what could I do? Report it to the police? No crime had actually been committed, just a series of innocuous, albeit creepy, messages. Hey. I started seeing it everywhere, in my real life, all throughout my day. I could no longer just report and block out the dreaded messages. Hey. I saw a billboard on my way to work, boldly declaring that one word. Hey. Next was a flyer on my telephone pole with those 3 letters. Hey. A note slipped in my mailbox. They know where I live. Hey. Sidewalk chalk along my driveway. Hey. Spray paint on the side of my house. Hey. Scrawled across my bathroom mirror. I knew the next time would be worse. Hey. I woke up in the middle of the night to the feeling of something in my mouth. Rolling over, I gagged and tore it from my fingers. It was a slip of paper, neatly rolled up, despite my saliva and grabbing. What do you want? I screamed desperately into the darkness. Hey. The darkness whispered back. My husband finally broke out of his shell. I've always described my husband Derek as a bit of an introvert, but that's not entirely correct. He's gregarious, funny, and charming, but you really have to break past an initial layer of shyness to get to the real him. I laugh because if we hadn't started talking through text first, I doubt I would have discovered the real part of him. He really brought his whole self to our date, and it was history after that. He's had his core group of friends for a while, but after we moved out of state for work, he has definitely struggled. I always made friends pretty easily and loved meeting new people. He was fine for a time coming to events and hanging out with my friends, but after a year or so, he said he started to miss having a regular friend group of his own. His other friends would visit, but they were far, and I sympathized. I encouraged him to go out there in some hobby groups of his, and to be fair, he really did, but nothing resulted in anything long-term outside the days his groups met. Oh, didn't you say he always wanted to learn how to DJ? My friend Cindy exclaimed. She was one of 3 women I met up with regularly for book club. Yeah, I think he makes really good playlists, but I think that obsession comes to what he thinks was a missed opportunity. What's stopping him now? Sarah asked as she sat back and brought her wine glass to her lips. Mostly money. We're just in catch-up mode from school right now, so not a lot of extra spending cash. I thought so, but that's why I asked, Cindy said, because I know of a club that meets up every Friday night, brings their equipment, and they practice. My sister went once, but said it wasn't her scene. Knowing her, she probably took a little longer than she preferred to catch on, but since most of the equipment is provided, that's a major barrier gone. I was pretty excited at the news, but that paled in comparison to the glee on his face. His first night out, he couldn't stop talking about the group, how talented everybody was, and that whole mood of the room changed when he got the chance to practice with one of his playlists. Honestly, they were welcoming, but a bit distant when I first came, but I think I really won them over. They even meet once a month for dinner. One of the guys said a lot of people usually disappear after the first month, but they hoped I would come back and become a regular member. For the next couple of weeks, things were great. I saw a shift in his mood for the better, and he carried himself with more confidence. I went ahead and told him we could forego our usual date night so he could go to the first dinner with his new friends. I think he went through multiple outfits that night before I just grabbed a button-up off the floor. Selfishly, it was my favorite of his. Don't stress over clothes. They obviously like you for you and your taste in music. Besides, if it was all about your clothes, they would have kicked you out a long time ago. I chuckled and gave him a kiss. You just don't understand the geek chick look I'm going for. Not everyone understands fashion. It's okay. Derek smirked and returned my kiss, then headed out. He checked in later that night to let me know they had talked him into going into a small venue where other musicians, DJs, and professionals frequented. I wasn't familiar, but I recognized I didn't know much about the underground music scene here. Derek returned at 2 a.m., a bit disheveled, but had clearly had a lot of fun. A couple of his friends had driven him home and helped him up to our door. A striking couple. The man introduced himself as Jamie, and a woman, who I assumed to be his girlfriend, said she was Natalie. She wrapped herself around Jamie's arm as soon as they got Derek to the door and apologized for letting him have a bit too much fun. I told them it was more than fine and reached out to help him inside. Before he crossed our entryway, Jamie grabbed his arm and dropped keys into his hand. "Don't want to forget this. We carpooled and your car should still be at the restaurant. Thought it would be less of a hassle since it's closer to you guys than whatever club we ended up at." I thanked him and could smell the faint scent of alcohol as I helped Derek inside. We headed towards our bedroom, and he recounted the parts of the night he could remember. I noticed as he talked, he kept massaging between his neck and right shoulder. I asked him to let me see, and gasped. "Jesus, what happened, Derek? This is horribly bruised. If someone tried to give you a hickey, they did an awful job. There was even specks of blood on his collar." Derek looked at me confused. He honestly had no idea anything was even there and thought it was just sore from a drunk incident. The place was pretty rowdy, and I do vaguely remember a sharp pain in my vision spinning. Before I knew what happened, Natalie had sat me down on one of the couches. People were pretty riled up and tried to get me to celebrate someone's birthday or something, but Jamie got them to leave me alone while I got it together. I was relieved he was okay, but didn't feel great that he was hurt for God knows what reason, and decided to leave it alone so we could get some sleep. The next few days were definitely odd to say the least. On the first day after his night out, Derek could barely keep his eyes open and kept complaining about how bright everything was. He was usually an all blinds fully open as much as possible kind of guy, much to my chagrin. I thought it was also odd because it wasn't particularly bright out that morning, but I passed it off as a hangover. The second day, he had trouble staying awake during the day. Derek was never a morning person and always a bit of a night owl, but this sluggishness seemed extreme. He was fully awake by the evening throughout the early morning. Since we weren't sure what was going on yet, he was able to get accommodations to work his new odd hours. Since he worked from home, it wasn't too much trouble. It would have to do until our doctor could come back with anything useful. On the third night, we were out on a date, but he didn't eat very much. He said he was fine with a couple of drinks and an appetizer he barely ate any of. On the fourth night, his normal chestnut skin had become washed and dull of color. Even his usually bright brown eyes had lost some of their luster, but were simultaneously sharper, more focused. It was like he watched where you were headed instead of where you currently were. On the fifth night, Derek had accidentally broke every glass he held while doing dishes, and on the sixth, he started to complain how dry his throat was, no matter how much he drank and tried to eat. He said he didn't feel satisfied. It was on the seventh night that his friend showed up to pick him up for another jam session. They had never done this before, and I wasn't too keen on him going, since we still had no idea what was going on, but it also seemed like a night out would do him some good. Honestly, I also felt like I needed a break to decompress and think of what else we could do to find out what was happening. I fell asleep faster than I intended, and was startled awake by an urgent rapping at our door. I went downstairs and saw Derek through the peephole and opened it. I covered my mouth in horror. Blood stained Derek's shirt, and as my mind came back, I saw it was on his face as well. He braced himself on the doorframe and said, "Hey, can I come in?" I don't know what it was, but despite my love for this man, something visceral in my body kept my mouth shut. I just stared for a few moments and slowly closed the door. He knocked again. "Please, Trish, let me in. I just want to talk. Look, I know this sounds weird, but if you come to the club with me, you can find out what's going on with me. They said they'd make an exception for you and let you inside." I had no idea what he was talking about. I barely heard what he said over the voice in my head screaming for me to keep him outside. I sat on the ground and stared ahead as he kept knocking and trying to convince me to go with him. I finally found it in me to creep back upstairs. I thought I was quiet, didn't make a sound, but he raised his voice for me not to go. I'm sitting in our room now, and I'm absolutely terrified. I don't know what to do. I drew our blinds closed because not long after being up here, I heard a soft, firm tapping on our bedroom window. I turned and saw Derek, effortlessly hanging from the outside wall, his eyes no longer pleading but sharp and hungry. I couldn't think while those eyes dissected me. I don't know what to do. The voice in my head telling me to keep him outside is getting quieter, while his voice is ever more prominent. "Trish, love, tell me I can come in. Let me in, Trish. Let me in." My imagination can run wild. I've always been very imaginative. Ever since I was a kid, I would make up entire worlds in my head where I was the main character. I would have different friends, a different family, a different life. I could be flying spaceships in the future or riding a dragon into battle, and it always felt like I was there, like I was important. When I got older, my parents tried to get me to stop. They hated how I would rather sit in my room for hours on end, living out fantasies. They wanted me to go out and make friends, experience life, and make real memories. But why would I do that when the memories I made in my own mind meant so much more? Why would I go play in the streets when I could instead play on a pirate ship? Why would I go to the mall with friends when I would much rather race down a mountain on horseback? They tried to take me to doctors, worried something was wrong with me. I would hear them whispering about me in the kitchen. They kept saying I had something in my head that made me this way. Some big word I can't remember the name of. They were scared. But why? There was nothing to be afraid of. It was all in my head, my safe place, my happier life. Why did they want to take that away from me? The longer they tried to convince me to stop, the angrier I got. One day, I got so mad at them, I decided to use my dream world to get my revenge from the safety of my room. I imagined I was a knight, clad in gorgeous armor, a huge sword, and a dragon at my side. My parents were criminals of the kingdom and needed to be executed. I carried out the order myself, and the kingdom rejoiced and shouted my name. I was the hero. I saved the entire land with my good deed. It wasn't until the voices faded and I awoke, finding myself sitting in a pool of blood with a butcher knife in my hand and my parents' bodies on either side of me, and that I realized maybe something is wrong with me.